This episode of the Multiracialverse podcast is brought to you by Evitan Couture, a brand born from a powerful vision and a deep connection to heritage. Founded by Shinnecock brothers Jason Tech King and Wayon Moon Smith, Evitan represents resilience and pride. From handmade tie-dye to wellness-focused athletic wear, each piece is crafted with intention and positivity, smudged with sage for good vibes, and delivered to you with love. Join the Evitan family on their journey of empowerment and inspiration. Hit up Moon on Instagram at Evitan_KS. That is native spelled backwards _KS to view product and place an order. Evitan Couture. Feel the spirit of resilience in every stitch.
I saw myself as the help. I never used to think of me as someone who could become financially free, as someone who could have wealth, right? And I'm not just talking about monetary wealth, but someone who has the resources to help other people, to create jobs for Latinas and women of color and people of color. Like, I've never thought of me as becoming that because my environment growing up, left and right, up and down, will scream, you are going to be the help.
Welcome to the Multiracialverse podcast, where we explore the diverse experiences and perspectives of multiracial and multicultural individuals across the globe. I'm your host, Antonio Fernandez, and today we have an incredibly inspiring guest joining us for episode 8. Luzy King, founder of Say Hola Wealth, is a trailblazer in her own right. A first-generation college graduate, Latino wealth coach, audacious leader, and advocate for financial empowerment, Luzy embodies resilience and determination, navigating through life's challenges with grace and tenacity. With a background deeply rooted in her cultural heritage, she brings a unique perspective to her work as a wealth coach. Drawing from her own experiences and overcoming adversity, she is on a mission to empower Latina and BIPOC individuals to break free from money trauma and cultivate sustainable wealth. As a successful entrepreneur on her journey to become a millionaire, she understands firsthand the importance of financial literacy and mindset in achieving true prosperity. Through her coaching, she not only imparts practical money management skills, but also fosters a holistic approach to wealth building, recognizing that true fulfillment comes from aligning our finances with our values and well-being. Join us as we delve into a remarkable story, exploring the intersections of race, culture, and wealth, and uncovering the transformative power of healing money trauma. Get ready to be inspired, enlightened, and empowered as we embark on this enlightening conversation with our guest, Luzy King, on episode 8 of the Multiracialverse podcast. Good afternoon, Luzy. Welcome to the Multiracialverse. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me, Antonio.
Yeah, the pleasure's all mine. I'm a follower of your work, and it's so inviting, and the energy you put out there is amazing. And so I'm excited to share your background and share your story and pass on the good word that you're sharing. So to get us situated with the audience, please share your background, where you're from, your family.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. So my family is from Mexico. However, based on our family history, we also have roots from the Basque area. And so the city where I grew up was in a very small town in Oregon. And I also grew up in Mexico. And so I've always had the passion for diversity and also the passion to learn about other cultural ethnicities, their customs, their foods, their traditions. So I've always been a big advocate of diversity and inclusion.
That's awesome. Awesome. And so are you first generation or?
Yes, I am a first generation Latina. Maybe you need me to expand a little bit more. So I am the first one in my family to go to high school. I am the first one in my family to go to college. I am the first one in my family to have a top executive job where I wasn't necessarily working physically for money, but I definitely was working mentally for money. And when I was at the top of my corporate career, I became what my boss used to call me, an audacious leader who wasn't afraid of going after the goals, right? Because that's what corporate America teaches us, that we have to go after the goals, that climbing the ladder is the definition of success. And so I was checking all those boxes. I started working in the hospitality industry when I was 16 years old as a housekeeper because I wanted to buy running shoes. I wasn't a runner. No one in my family has ever done sports, but I wanted to become part of the group because I saw that the people that were in the group were, what I call chicos, like young adults that were very focused on studying. And I needed that because I knew that education was my way out of poverty. And so I decided to go and apply for a job. And that was actually one of my childhood dreams. I wanted to work in the hospitality industry. I wanted to work as a hotel manager. I wanted to travel to meet different cultures, diversity. And I did all of that. And because I started working for this company at a young age, they allowed me to adjust my schedule so I could go to school in the afternoon whenever I had to go in and have my competitions for track and meet or cross country. They will allow me to have the day off. And so I was very loyal to this company because I had the identity of, oh my God, they're so good to me. They sacrifice so much for me, so I have to be here. And so I was able to finish my education through community college. So I've never had a traditional education where you go to a 4-year university or where you have, like classes all day. I've never had that. I was doing online school because before that became a trend, right? Like what we see now. And so eventually what I did is I got my bachelor's, continued to work for the company. But when I was on the top, I met my husband and we decided that we wanted bigger goals. And so one of our goals was we wanted to become parents. And I was what I call like an older mom because I wasn't having kids when I was younger because I was so focused on, I need to have an education. I need to have a career because that's how bad I wanted to get out of poverty. And so we became parents when we were like older. And when I'm talking older, I'm talking about like 30s.
Yeah.
And so I remember walking into my boss's office to share the news and he was not happy with me. He saw my pregnancy as an obstacle that was going to deteriorate my career. He also made the comment of my pregnancy now being a quote unquote problem. And when he told me those words, that's when I met my money trauma. I could physically feel that there was something going on in my body, and it wasn't embarrassment. It wasn't anger. It was almost like as if my body literally shattered inside of me. And I remember thinking like, what is this feeling? And so that's how I became aware that I was holding money trauma that had been passed to me from generations and generations of other mujeres before me.
Where did you develop your attitude towards work, towards money? If your parents, it sounds like you said they didn't even go to high school there, or they didn't graduate.
No, my mother has a 3rd level education, or she did at that time. Now it's changed.
Okay.
So where did I develop I guess the energy of wanting to have a better life?
Yes.
I've always been a curious mind. Like that's something that I've always been a curious mind. I've always been a creative. And at a young age, I remember asking myself, like, is this it? And I grew up in a very religious household where everything was geared towards like, God wants this, God wants you to do that, right? And so I actually started questioning at some point, like, does God really want me to do this, right? And my grandma, who's now passed, she was very religious Catholic, but I also saw how some of the things and the stories that she shared with me kind of conflicted with what society was also sharing, right? And so I remember being curious about, is this it, right? For example, my mom saying things like, and my grandma too, like, hey, if you want to have money, you have to work hard for money. Like I remember being 7 years old and wondering, like, do we really need to work hard for money? And whenever I will go to places or events and I would notice somebody, like, for example, a kid that maybe had a comic book, because back then when I grew up, those were very popular. I remember seeing kids like holding a comic book and wondering, like, how come I don't have that? How come I don't have that? And I remember asking my mom, hey, how come I don't have a book like that? And she will tell me, like, we can't afford it. Like, that's not for you. And there was a time in my life when my relationship with my mom was fractured because she was trying to protect me from learning new things because she didn't know. I mean, she had a third level education. And so all of these fears that she was presenting to me were not, it wasn't that she didn't love me or that she didn't want me to succeed. It was that she never got to experience that. And so when I realized that there were thoughts written on these books from other people that talk about how self-development, your self-concept, your self-belief, and even ideas on how to create money. Like, I remember reading a children's book that talk about how to make money by having how to create your own circus. That was the name of the book, how to create your own circus. And I was like, well, I don't have any animals. I don't have any pets. And I remember thinking, like, but maybe I can make them. And that's what I did. Like, I made, like, back then, Muppets. And I remember creating them and having, quote unquote, my own circus and, like, charging my little friends like $1, like, hey, come to my circus. We're gonna have this whole show. And I correct myself, it wasn't $1, it was 25 cents. But I've always had that curiosity of me, and I continue to have it now through my work and through the things that I do, because that's how $1 million minds work. You cannot be complacent. You cannot be thinking about what worked yesterday is going to continue to work, because it doesn't. We have to be open to learn and evolve. And I've studied many, many cases of people that are millionaires, and that's one of the best qualities that they have, that they continue to be a student of life.
Yes. And do you feel that the book you read about, the children's book, and other, I guess, more Americanized things impacted the way you looked at money back then when you were younger, teenager, the American dream per se? Was that something that you thought about?
So I didn't think of growing up, my definition of the American dream was you have to have an education, right? I wasn't even thinking about you have to have a house, you have to have a car, you have to have the opportunity to go places, because I mean, I was busy working, but my definition and what I believe was the American dream was you have to have an education. And for the longest time, Antonio, I saw myself as the help. I never used to think of me as someone who could become financially free, as someone who could have wealth, right? And I'm not just talking about monetary wealth, but someone who has the resources to help other people, to create jobs for Latinas and women of color and people of color. Like, I've never thought of me as becoming that, because my environment growing up, left and right, up and down, will scream, you are going to be the help. You don't become successful. You work hard for money. You are meant to exchange your income for your labor. And so for those people that struggle with seeing themselves as someone who can break generational cycles, is take a look at your environment. What is your environment telling you that you can be, and can you change that? And going back to the time when I decided to become part of the cross-country team, I think that that's what I was seeking. I was fighting to change my environment, because at home, back in the day, again, my relationship has changed so much with my parents and my sisters. But back then it was like, put the book down and get to work. And so we need to understand that in order for us to move to the next phase, whatever that is, we truly need to change the environment.
Yeah, that's amazing. And it makes me think that, and this is a whole other conversation about spirit. And that's what I love about what you bring, is you bring this beautiful spirit to your work, and when you speak, and there was just something there that was driving you, even if being a young age, your parents weren't. But I think the one thing that was even more important than that too, which individuals struggle with, is the idea of what is education. And you said it perfectly, that having that curious mind, and you did go through an education system, but continually learning can look like anything,
Yeah.
and that's something that's really important too, because I think people think of, just you got to get the degree, and that's really the only way you can do this and you can learn. But as you demonstrate, there's multiple ways, or more ways than just the one traditional way.
Yeah. I always say that formal education can get anybody out of poverty, for sure. But self-education will make you millions.
Yeah. Yeah. And when did you start having that mindset? Was it teenage years, or was it at that point that you had that conversation with your supervisor, and he started to say your pregnancy was a problem? Was that the point where you started to research, what am I feeling, and it led you down a path?
So this is such a good question. So when he told me that I had become a problem for the company, and this was his opinion. I always like to make sure that I share that, like, this was his opinion. This wasn't the opinion of the owners of the company. It was his opinion, but I knew that my body felt something that I've never felt, that felt different. And so I went through the process of looking at him in the eye and telling myself, like, don't cry. Don't give him the right to see you cry. But I remember looking at him and I said, I need to step outside. And I remember stepping outside to even kind of soak in what I was feeling. And I think it was in the moment that I said, what am I doing here? Like, what am I doing here? I'm building a business for somebody else. And as you know, when companies grow, there's a lot of things that change. There's a lot of profits over people. And some of the management, the middle management, was kind of shifting into that profits over people. And I didn't feel that my personal values were in alignment with where the company was heading. And so I made the decision of, I think it's time for me to go. And, through the process, I felt so much guilt because I worked hard for that. I worked so hard for that position. I worked so hard for that degree. I worked so hard to, quote unquote, prove that I was capable of moving from being a housekeeper to now leading a team, to now being an audacious leader. And through that process of me searching, like, what am I feeling? Like you're saying, I came across the concept of trauma of money. And I was like, I've never heard of the word trauma. I remember, and this might sound shocking to your listeners, but I've never heard the word trauma until I heard about the global pandemic that was happening. And I remember listening to the news outlets saying, like, oh my God, many people are losing their jobs and this is going to create financial trauma. And I was like, what is that? So it's very recent that I made my trauma. And so I started diving into, okay, Google, let's look up, like, what is trauma? Because for me, trauma, I've always associated trauma with, something that happened, perhaps like violence or sexual trauma or all of these, but I've never heard of the concept of trauma of money or money trauma. And so once I dove into, I'm going to be curious what it is, then I learned that this is something that it's even just gifted to you without you even realizing. And so I knew that walking into the room of meeting my trauma was going to be one of the most challenging things that I could ever do in my life. But I was ready. I said, I want answers. I want to understand why why I have so much money avoidance. I want to understand why I continually believe that I'm destined to be the help. And I wanted to understand why when my salary negotiations didn't happen, why didn't I go back to say, hey, here's how I help your company. And so me meeting my trauma was in a way a blessing, because it gave me the opportunity to heal so much of those wounds that, again, were not even mine. Make sure that I care for them so I can come back and now teach what I teach, which is, decolonizing money, which includes going through the process of financial healing. And for some people I don't want to say that it's easier, because trauma can be easy, but it's also, trauma cannot be measured the same way, right? Like my trauma might feel to me that is like this huge, heavy thing that I'm carrying. But when I share my story with other people, they might say, oh, that's nothing. This and this happened to me, right? And their trauma is like 3 times bigger. And so trauma cannot be measured, but it definitely is something that needs to be healed, especially if you do want to break cycles, if you want to become the first millionaire in your family, because the way I see money and wealth is not just a monetary number that is placed in my bank account. It's all about my gifts, my talents, how I communicate, how I can help communities heal, and how I can also make money with not what the formal institutions say that I can make money, but also with the non-traditional way of making money, right? For example, a podcast.
Yeah. Gosh, you pack so much into those responses. So in what ways did this trauma manifest when you started looking at it? Just maybe share a couple of ways when looking back after that experience, when you started to do the research, what did you started maybe to think about, oh, my parents did this. Oh, and that's possibly where this trauma, was birthed. Yeah.
So a good example that I can think of is, growing up, I was told multiple times by my grandma, like, you need to have a man to care for you. And so I've always had the identity of like, no, I don't need a man to care for me. And so looking back at how my relationship with money. So, my parents divorced when I was literally like a day old. My mom, they didn't divorce. My mom walked out of a relationship where she was being financially abused, physically abused. And so because of that, I created a wound of abandonment wound, right? And so I heard stories from my family members about how my dad left or was abusive to my mom because of money, because he preferred to go with my abuela, which is my grandma, his mother, and how my dad always preferred wealth versus me or our family. And so to me, that translated into, you can't have money, because if you have money, then no one is going to love you.
Oh, wow.
And so when I was in my corporate career and I was making all this money, I was just how fast I was making the money, I was spending the money, because I have the belief that if I had money, no one was going to love me. And so I developed a compulsive overspending. Like I will go get a paycheck, or my paycheck will be deposited into my bank account. And then on that Friday, I will go and buy clothes, right? Because, I'm a professional. I have to look good. I have to look, quote unquote, expensive. I'm an executive. I was code switching so much on like, I have to look a certain way and maintain certain status to be accepted into this role that now I hold. And so when I dove into the trauma of money and all of these patterns, right? Because for some people, it's a feeling, which I also had that, but it's also patterns that you learn. I realized that, oh my gosh, this is why I'm an overspender. Oh my gosh, this is why I dated so much. This is why when I was like maybe in love with someone at that time, I will break up with them, because I'll be like, oh, now I'm in love. Now they're going to leave me, right? And so now my relationship with money and my relationship with wealth is one of mutual respect, right? Like I tend my money, I care for my money, but also I've learned that my money and the wealth that I have does not define who I am. My values, who I am at the core is truly what defines who Lucy King is. And what you see is what you get. This is how I coach. This is how I work with people. Because I am I am a human being who loves other humans, who loves to share knowledge, and also who wants to thrive together. Like, I do believe that, money and abundance is so endless that anyone can have it. Now, in order for us to have it and access it, we truly need to heal our relationship with how we see it, because society and capitalism and colonialism says, well, when you have money, you're taking from other people. When in reality, it's like, no, when you have money, you're breaking cycles, you're creating jobs. Like, I used to work for someone, and now I create jobs for other people. And to me, amazing. To have the privilege to do that, I'm just in awe of, wow, imagine if all of us feel that way.
Yes, for sure. And so it was great, the example you gave, how it was attached to romance and how it was possibly attached to the relationship your parents had romantically, but also economically. And when you're looking at with your program, and we'll get into it a little bit deeper, but what are some of the other pillars besides romance that you look at that seem to be intertwined with finances that you have to basically unwind somebody from when they're looking at their trauma?
People pleasing.
Okay.
People pleasing is huge. And so I'm a big advocate of therapy as well, as you know. And so I went to therapy because, I'm building this empire. I have to get all the help I can. And so I went to therapy. And I've learned that I also had people pleasing tendencies, which if you ask any of my family members, my friends, if you say Lucy is a people pleaser, they'll be like, hell no, she's not. But I discovered that. And so, a lot of my clients struggle with people pleasing, especially because of cultural expectations. So, as first gen Latinas, sometimes we hear this narrative of, well, your parents sacrificed so much for you, so now it's your duty to take care of them. It's your duty to help them, have a good retirement, which, hey, like, I'm doing that for my mother. But at the same time is, you cannot give up your life's purpose to make somebody else's happy, right? Like, can you do that? Absolutely. Should you do it? No, because that's how cycles are created. My abuela gave up her dream so my mom could have her dream. My mom gave up my dream so I could have my dream. And guess what? I'm not giving up my dream so my daughters can have her dream. I'm living my dream so I can show my daughter that, hey, it's possible for you to create whatever you want. And so my clients do struggle with people pleasing, with financial boundaries. And I do coach them on, you're not saying no. You're not saying, no, I'm not going to help you. What you're saying is, let me look at what I can do. And so I've always coached my clients on set up a loved one emergency fund or a peace of mind. So set money aside for your loved one, after you take care of you. Then set up the fund so you can help them. But also when they come and ask you for money, don't feel like you have to always say yes in the moment. You might still say yes, but you can make time to say, let me look at my finances and get back to you. Because I've been there, right? Where my family members come and ask me for money. I'm like, yeah, here's 1,000, here's 200, here's 500. And I didn't realize that I was actually enabling them. So I had become a financial enabler, right? And because we love them so much, we think, oh my God, this is going to be helpful for them. But in reality, it's like, no, you're hurting them and you're hurting you. And both of you are going on this cycle. And so people pleasing, the other bigger thing is money avoidance, especially for my clients that work in a 9-to-5. because they have the identity of, I have to be productive. My boss needs me to create those reports. I had to hit the sales quota. I have to take care of my team, right? So workaholism is actually a money condition that prevents people from really allowing themselves to look at their finances. And I had it too, where everything else was more important than my money. And when I'm having these conversations with my clients, I always say, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how much money you make. What matters is how much money you keep.
Yeah.
And I said, I left an industry after 17 years and I had $2,000 in a checking account. It wasn't even a savings account, right? And so always looking at what is making me avoid my finances, and workaholism is a huge one. And so I always try to give them tools, but also share my personal experience. And I think that's why people kind of gravitate towards working with me, because I'm not teaching the concepts of capitalism. I'm not teaching the concepts that were written by white men. I'm teaching the concepts that were developed by this beautiful brain that you see, which I'm pointing at my brain. But I'm also adding the cultural narrative that we don't hear. And the other thing is, I have clients that have DACA status. Not sure you're familiar with it.
Yep.
And so we talk about how these situation or circumstance, how that really holds them from going after their dreams, from creating a better life. And so depending on which client I'm working with, I'm able to tailor the coaching specifically to help them, because someone that has the privilege of having a status versus someone who has DACA or someone who has no status, that healing looks so different, and also the strategy looks so different.
Yeah, that's really, really beautiful. One quick step back to, you started researching and getting to know yourself and your trauma. Take us from that point then to the creation of your company, because we're kind of talking about it, but I want to make sure we get to that, because then it makes a whole lot more sense too. So.
Yeah. So after I've learned about my trauma and, how to become aware of what is happening, I've also learned that the systems that were in place, and when I'm talking about systems, I'm talking about like the budgeting way, the narrative around, if you want to become debt free, you have to cut expenses. Like I live frugal my entire life. Like I used to eat beans and rice. There were times when we didn't have money for rent. So I lived through all of that scarcity, and I didn't like the narrative. I also didn't like the narrative that society was saying when it came to the social media, right? Like, women are bad with money. It's like, are we, right? Like, are we really bad with money? And so again, we're such a big byproduct of our environment. And so I started having conversations with my husband about, I said, like I didn't learn how to budget at home. I didn't learn how to invest at home. And I actually started Googling. I mean, Google was my best friend. I started looking like financial literacy. And then I came across an article that said financial literacy is not taught at schools. And when I read that, I was like, what? Like, I almost feel robbed of these like wealth. And so I decided that I started thinking like, I got to teach people what I'm learning, because I'm a teacher. I've always been a teacher. And so I always wanted to share with people. And so the first thing I did was I created financial literacy circles in my community. But then I realized that the people that were coming to those circles were not the people that I wanted to reach, right? It was like white women that were wealthy, that were just chatting about how they gifted a Roth to their grandchild, and now he was wealthy. And I was like, I can't teach these people. And so I decided to create my business after I was denied access by a financial planner, because I didn't have $100,000 to invest. And she told me like, come back when you have that. And then because I don't give up, I went and started having conversations with the second one. And she told me like, oh, come back when you have 100,000 and I don't help people like you. And so I think that's when I had even bigger question marks, like, why are we not talking about this? And again, I went back to Google, and Google introduced me to the concept of wealth gap. It introduced me to the concept of, how black families have less wealth. Then I went into Latino, and then I came across the Latina wage gap on how Latinas are underpaid. And I was just like, I'm not okay with just sitting here. And, I had no business deciding that I'm going to make a difference, because, for all I care, I could just be like, whoa, I'm making wealth. I'm investing. I'm just going to keep the knowledge to myself, but that's not who I am, and going back to the beginning of the podcast where I share, like, I'm a big advocate of diversity and inclusion. And so I said, I'm going to create something that is going to teach people how to do this. And, I was faced with a lot of doors that close on me. People saying like, no, we don't do that. No, you can't do that. I had even people tell me like, well, you have to go to the other city because that's where the Latino and underrepresented live. And so I just decided, well, what if I do it online? What if I do it online and I can just reach like the masses?
Yeah.
and I've never done anything like that, Antonio. Like I've never put myself out there because I was raised to be so private. I mean, the fact that I'm talking about my money trauma with you and your audience, that tells you that I've healed it, right? But for the longest time, I could not talk about my stress. I couldn't talk about, my anxiety, my depression. I went through postpartum depression and nobody knew because that's how I was taught to be, right? To be the woman that looks put together, that has her shit together. But I really didn't have that. And so building my business wasn't just an idea that I wanted to make me look good. Building my business is really a movement to help other people that are ready, because that's the thing. I want to teach everyone, like every one of your listeners, like I really want to teach them, every single one of them. But not everyone is ready to do the work because it takes time, especially with the way our society celebrates like quick wins and dopamine hits and all of these, right? Like we want results today. And it's like, no, like I'm building now, but I didn't get here yesterday. This is a lifetime work, really. Like, yes, I became financially literate like 6 years ago, but it has been like my life's work of me wanting to break out of poverty, me wanting to, use education as a way for upward mobility. But now it's like I'm building wealth, but it's not even for me. It's so I can create change and also, give my daughters a lot of options, because even though, yes, I hope that they decide to go to college, I also want them to know that they can make their own money too. Like they don't have to have a 9 to 5 to create income, because there's so many ways now to create that money.
That's really, really beautiful. And I want to I do want to ask about, how you plan to, because your daughters are younger, right?
Yeah, they're 6 and 4 now.
But I know you're already talking to them and you're already teaching them and they're already good stewards of money. But what, during that transition period, and your company or your organization or company is called Say Hola Wealth, right?
Yes.
So you put that out there. What did the relationship look like with your husband? Was he working? Were you struggling once you left your job?
Yeah.
And I mean, there had to be, some conversations going on, but it sounds like there was also some support for, you, and he understood what kind of individual you were, somebody to do that after 17 years. So
after I had the conversation with my boss, I used to drive 45 minutes to get to work. Actually more than that. It's like, let me do that math in my head. That was like an hour and 20 minutes every day, sometimes longer, during the winter months. And I remember that day leaving and telling myself, like, I've already made the decision that I was going to leave. But then as I'm driving, I'm crying in my car, and I was like, how am I going to say this to my husband? How am I going to tell him that I've decided to quit? Because at that point, I haven't even like put my resignation or anything, but all of the fear that I was having was because growing up, every conversation that was related to money was always a fight. Always physical, verbal abuse. Like I witnessed a lot of that. So I had a lot of fears. And I came home, and my husband is also an entrepreneur who had just launched his own business. Let me think, like a couple of years before I decided to do this. No, a year before I decided to quit my job. And so we had just paid off student loan debt. So financially, we didn't have reserves. But we were, quote unquote, stable. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I had the conversation with him, shared with him what happened, how I felt, and I'm crying, right? And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
oh my God, I'm like, I was a big victim because I didn't feel good. And then he looked at me and said, what would you like to do? And when he said that to me, I'm standing in my kitchen, and I even remember holding the kitchen counter because I thought that he was going to be mad at me. Because again, that's what I saw growing up, right? Yes. Like I watch a lot of like slaps and yells and all. And so I'm holding the counter thinking, oh my God, here I go. I saw my mother in me. And he just looked at me in the eye and he said, what would you like to do? And he gave me a big hug and said, you know, whatever you want to do, I'm supportive. And I said, but I work so hard. And he said, but that's not who you are anymore. And so he gave me the autonomy of making a decision, which eventually I decided, I am going to quit my job. But again, that also came with like, oh my God, now I'm financially dependent on a man, the things that I've always wanted to avoid, right? Yes. And so I had a conversation with him and I said, I want to do something. I want to do something, like I want to make my own money. Like, thank you for giving me the privilege of becoming a stay-at-home mom, but that's not for me. Like, I want to make my own money. And so again, going back to the American dream, that's when I decided to go back to school to earn my MBA. And then I'm glad I did, because through the process, that's where I learned about investing and how you can make money when you sleep and all of these. But the conversation with him was very different than what I saw growing up.
And were you using his system of managing money when you were in this transition period? And if so, what did that look like versus where you're possibly at now as a couple?
Yeah. So because we had paid off student loan debt, like we were managing the finances together. And this is something that we also do now. So we've, at the beginning when we were paying off debt, we were more cautious of our money, but also even from the moment we decided to become financially free, we knew that we didn't want to be frugal. So my husband is a white man, but he also grew up in poverty, just like I did, right? Like I made so much assumptions about him for being a white man. I was like, oh yeah, he has all this money and he's wealthy and he has all this privilege, right? But I think that one of the things that I've learned about him too is that sometimes we make assumptions about other people too, right? Like we see a white man and we're like, oh, he's wealthy. He has a privilege, which he does. But also sometimes we tend to think like, oh, they're there and I'm here. And so my husband and I, in our childhood story, it's so similar that it almost feels like it got copied from each other. The only difference is that I'm Latina and he's not. And so we decided to really embody this idea of creating multiple income streams. So he has two jobs. Like he's an entrepreneur. He has his own business, but he also has what I call a side hustle with the same profession that he has. And then for me, it's like I was looking at what can I do, right? How can I utilize all of the skills that I gain in my corporate career to create multiple income streams? And so we were able to focus on paying off debt. And now I want to say that I'm the CFO of the house, but we both look at our money, right? Like when it comes to investing, I'm the one that I will tell him like, hey, I think that you should do this, but I always say, here is why. Like you're going to have a tax advantage. You're going to do this, right? And so, my husband, even though he does have a high level education, just like me, he also didn't know that you can invest outside your 9 to 5. And so as an entrepreneur, because I had the knowledge, I started telling him like, hey, you can do your own 401k, you can do your own company profit sharing, you can do like all of these things. And so it's so interesting because his first comment to me was, well, let me talk to the financial planner, because he had one. And I said, well, make sure that you invite me to that conversation when you go and talk to him. And he did. And so we went and met with a financial planner, which is a white man. And when they were having this conversation, I will interact and say like, oh, so why is that investment better than this? Yes. And he tried to like, well, because of this. And I was like, well, there's some studies that show that, and he's like, are you in finance? And I said, no, I just like to read. And so I was able to kind of show my husband that, hey, not everyone has your best interest. There's amazing financial planners, but there's also those that don't. And so we were able to work with him to essentially do what we wanted. And then now my husband still has a financial planner for the main business. But we also, like, I manage the investments for my daughters, the investments for my husband outside of his work, my own investments. And for those people that are listening, like, managing your own investments is like using Amazon online. Like, you remember the first time you open the account and you have to click buy and you're like, wait, am I doing this right? Sometimes it feels like that. But the thing with investing is you're not always buying. You dedicate time to learn the language. You dedicate the time to like heal any money wounds that you have. But then once you invest, it's just like a thing that you do once. Like, it takes less than 3 minutes. You automate, you reinvest, and then all you have to do is be patient, and all you have to do is create the habits and the resources to have more money, right? So investing is so simple. Like, I cannot address it enough. It's so simple. The reason why we don't do it, it's because of all these fears and cultural narrative around money, and the belief, right? We see wealthy people and you're like, they're bad people. We see wealthy people like, they're taking advantage of people. We see wealthy people and we have the identity of, they must be doing something wrong, right? And all of that comes from our cultural beliefs, because our parents or abuelas believe that if people have money, they have to be dishonest. But it's like, I've met so many people, which now I have had the privilege of meeting, millionarias, billionaires that are Latinas, and they're great, great people. They write checks. They write checks. And so, you just have to believe that wealth building is for you. And the other thing is, wealth is not, you get to decide how that looks like, right? Like, for example, for me, I like to look nice, physically nice, but I don't need to buy the latest things. I don't need to have the latest car. I don't need to have the bigger home. For me, wealth is, yes, living comfortably, because there was a time in my childhood when I used to live in houses that have no floor, that had no ceiling. But also, I don't need to show my wealth. I don't need to wear it. That's what I call, I don't need to wear my wealth, because for me is, right now there's so many things going on in the world. And for me is writing a check. Literally, like writing a check, because we want to help people. And so that's what wealth is to me. I use money to help. I use money to create resources. And sometimes when people ask me like, wow, like, do you do anything for free? It's like, yeah, I do things for free. I create podcasts for free. Yes. I create blogs for free. I do all of these things because I do want us to build wealth juntos. Like, one of my sayings is like, I do believe in that 100%.
Yeah. And I get your newsletter, which I think it might be daily. I think I get one at least daily. Always has some good tidbits in it too. So.
Yes, and thank you for saying that, because let me just stop this right here. So my newsletter is going to change, which I haven't told anybody, Antonio. So you get like the first the first chisme, I guess, the gossip of the newsletter. So my newsletter is called The Wealthy Mujer, which means like wealthy woman. And it really is about me sharing the tips that I'm doing, right? But I have been on a journey of, I want to be more inclusive, right? Like I want to be more inclusive because people like you are reading it, right? And I cannot like address you like, hey, busy mujer, because that's what I used to say. And so I have been, I'm working right now on restructuring my newsletter. So people that join actually have actionable steps they can take like the moment they join, right? Like do I want you to work with me? Absolutely. I would love to be your coach, but you don't have to wait to get there. And so I'm restructuring the newsletter with a new name that is going to be pretty amazing. And so, Latinas, Latinos, BIPOC, anybody can join because that's who I am at the core. That I help everyone in, even though my business, say Hola Wealth, is geared towards Latinas and underserved communities. I'm inclusive. Like I want to help everyone because that's, again, I just keep repeating myself. I just say that like 3 times, but I really want us to build wealth juntos. And so thank you for being part of the newsletter. It's going to change. It's going to give you so many good things. And you're
And it's funny you bring that up about your current focus or the bigger focus being on Latinas or BIPOC women. And I like sometimes look at them, I was like, I wonder if she like helps like men out or like,
So I have clients, that are men. And so where this came about, was because, I have nieces and nephews. Yeah. And so, my nephews, I have a nephew who is, he's the oldest, and he wouldn't tell me anything, but he told my sister, like, how come my aunt doesn't want to help me? And I was like, I do help men. I guess I don't promote it. Right. And so he kind of gave me the idea of like, oh my God, like, am I excluding men from these? Like, am I coming across as a men hater? Because,
No.
And so I do help men. In fact, I get hired to go to colleges and university to speak to first gen students, and the majority of them are men, right? And so I do help them. I just can't wait for you guys to see the change because you're going to love it.
Yeah. I mean, most of what you share is, it will work for any gender.
Yes.
I love the spiritual aspect of it too. Like part of your method is unraveling that and following like that spirit within who we really want to be. Do individuals that you work with, do they have do they have trouble doing that at first, or like say, oh, this is like, do you run into somebody going, oh, like, I don't know about energies or things like that,
Of course. Yes, of course. And the reason why is because, if you just think about how we are taught to learn, right? Like we go to an institution that teaches us curriculum that was written to make us become workers, right? They teach us how to socialize. Like I see it now with my 6-year-old. She's going to a bilingual bilateral school, and they're very like strict on the rules and how she interacts, right? And so when I'm talking to people about, for example, when it comes to having debt, people feel shame. I feel shame, right? And so I coach them on things like, hey, let's do a journaling exercise where you release the debt shame, where you write it down. And some people are skeptical. They're like, I'm here so you can teach me investing. Like, what are we doing? And I'm like, well, we're going to get there. Right. And so it is a holistic approach. I've also had people that when I say like, hey, we need to self-coach, they're like, I don't have time for that. Just teach me how to make money. And so I do understand the hesitation because I remember being introduced to the concept of self-coaching and I was like, what? What is this? Yeah. And so there's modalities that I teach, but also one of the biggest things that we have to understand, especially as, BIPOC and being like multicultural and multidiverse and all of these, is that our body remembers. Our body remembers so much of the traumas that we've gone through. And so if you don't tend to your nervous system, you're going to continue to feel that you don't belong. I'll give you an example. When I first purchased my home, I've never had a home, right? And buying a home is not for everyone, but I grew up with moving 28 times by the time I was 18.
Wow.
And so I've never had a home. And for me and my husband, purchasing a home was a big deal. And I remember being in this house and still feeling the urge of like, I have to go outside. Almost like escaping from my own home and or like looking at the door and like, is anybody coming? And that's when you develop like self-awareness of your money thoughts and your emotions. And I remember thinking like, why do I keep looking at the window? Like, why do I feel this urge of like leaving? And that's because my body remembered that whenever we were comfortable in a new place, it wasn't for long. We always have to leave because, we got the late notices, eviction notices, like you gotta move notice. And so for the longest time, I even used to have a problem opening like my own mail. Yeah. When it came to like our home, like our mortgage, because growing up, I used to read the letters to my mom, like, hey, we gotta leave. We didn't pay rent. And so I do teach a lot of, awareness, nervous system regulation. Like I do all of these things. And yeah, some people think like, that's just so crazy, Lucy. But also I probably got like, I've coached so many people now, but I probably got to people that were like, yeah, I'm not doing that. And I said, that's fine. That's fine. You don't need to do that. But people that I want to say like 95% of my clients have done it and they love it. And when they practice, because it is a practice, when they practice these modalities, like money just flows to them. Like I had a client recently that she negotiated her salary. She got her compensation that she wanted. And then 2 months later, she got like $10,000 extra for something that she did as an add-on bonus. And she's like, I've never had anybody like advocated for me. I never had this money just come. And I said, that happens when you really practice abundance. Like that's the universe trying to teach you that, hey, you don't need to work hard for money. And so I can talk to you about all of these, but yeah, I'm big on like modalities and making sure that we don't just make it about money, the currency of money, because when we do, it just goes faster.
I love your approach. It's the holistic approach of healing. I took a healing ourselves before we can be, I wouldn't say pure enough, but be more authentic, the authentic self, to be able to approach things in a way that's not convoluted by fear, anger, and all those things that trauma creates in us. So who do you have a mentor? Did somebody mentor you at any one point? Obviously your husband's an entrepreneur. And then also maybe share some of your favorite go-tos for, Google, we all know Google, but who are some individuals you look up to in this space of healing, that you might want to share?
Oh my God. So, I do want to share that I've never, ever had mentors until 2000 and hold on, let me go back. In 2019, that's when I hired my first mentor. Because I was like, I run a business. I'm a CEO. Like I do all these things I should know, but I started investing in coaching and mentorship in 2019, and I have not stopped investing. And, I also invest in therapy. And so my therapist kicked me out. She said, yeah, I no longer need her, which is great. But I invest in big things. So one of the things that I do is every morning I listen to an app where I practice a lot of self-compassion. So that's like my first mentor, like the app, that Calm app. I use that a lot. And then I have hired mentors. One of my biggest mentors that give me permission to use my voice to share my story. Let me tell you about this coach. So I knew that I wanted to become a public speaker as part of like how I make money, because I've always loved to talk. Like I've always been a talker and I love doing that. And I love books. I love to read. And so I joined her program, Slay the Mic, and I had so many fears around my voice. Like I couldn't even listen to my own voice. Okay. And this is before I launched my podcast, and she gave me the permission to be who I am, especially with an accent or there's certain words that I can't pronounce correctly, even though I try many, many times. And so she just gave me the permission to use a microphone to change people's lives. So she has been one of my biggest mentor that to this date, I still look up to. I just shared with her that I got a keynote. So I have my first keynote coming. And so she has been someone that has changed my life, like literally. I have worked with other mentors as well. But I don't agree 100% with what they're teaching. So I will share who they are. And the reason why is not because I want to, hold the information, but just because I will be giving someone a disservice if I share who they are. And then they think, oh my God, like Lucy recommended them. But for sure, Jam, like she's changed
Jamila.
my life.
It looks like Jamila Gamble is her name.
She doesn't go by Jamila, but
Jam. Okay.
I've read books that have changed my life, which I'm happy to share with your audience. Like I've read a book called Money as Medicine. That book changed my life. I've read a lot of books about breaking cycles. There's now a new book right now called Cycle Breaker. It's by a Latina with a PhD. I just ordered it. So I read a lot of books on psychology, and I've always read books on psychology since I was little, which is interesting. But those are good. And right now I am working with 2 new coaches. So I have 3 coaches right now. I have a business coach. I have a voice coach. And then I have another coach that I can't share yet who she is. But my voice coach, which is different than the speaking coach, she is amazing. She's 50 plus years old, but has the energy of a 20-year-old. She's amazing. Denise Woods. I recommend if someone wants to dive into, like a voice coach, she is the one. For example, she knows that I do interviews, and she's always telling me like, you have to smile when you talk because, and I'm like, I do. And she's like, but not always. There's times when you're like, do this. So she's hilarious. She's hilarious. And she's teaching me a lot. And so those are the people that I honestly will recommend. Other people out there that I think are doing the work that I personally admire. I haven't worked with them, but like Dramos, for example, is someone that I like his vibe. He's very authentic. He's very like different. And I think that different is good. And so for anyone that is looking for mentorship, I always say work with someone who is where you want to be. And so, for example, I now have, I have multiple investments. I'm on track to become the first millionaire in my family, but I'm not being mentored by people that have $1 million. I'm being mentored by people that have 10 million. I'm being mentored by people that have 1 billion, right? I've been mentored by people that are where, for example, Lucy as a CEO I'm not being mentored by people that have a 6-figure business or a multiple 6-figure business. I'm being mentored by people that have a 7-figure business and multiple 7-figure business. And so when it comes to mentorship, I always try to look for the people that are like where I'm heading, right? I might not get there tomorrow or next year, but I already have the knowledge of, okay, this is what I need to do.
share with your children your mindset and how to build wealth at from a young age?
Yeah, I love that question. So one of the biggest things that I'm doing as a mom, and my husband and I are very much on the same page when it comes to parenting, is that we are teaching our kids one of our biggest values and our biggest gifts is, when it comes to wealth, is that wealth doesn't have a color. We're big on teaching them like wealth is not wealth is not one dimensional. Wealth is for everyone. And so we teach them that. We're big on teaching them delay gratification. So just because we have the resources doesn't mean that you're going to get it now. I'm also teaching my daughter or my daughters that they don't get paid for chores. I know a lot of parents do that. We're not big on that. Like, chores are their responsibility and they have to do it. They don't get paid for chores, but they do get paid for reading books. So in my household, reading is a currency.
I like that.
And so they're always reading. They read. We're big on buying books that, show diverse point of views, diverse backgrounds. And with my daughters, I also teach them the concept of invest, spend, and give. And so they're both investors. They know what investing is. They understand the concept of money, the concept of compound. They also understand the concept of savings and the concept of big giving. They're big on giving, especially around Christmas time. We adopt families to buy them like Christmas gifts and things like that. And they understand that. And so my hope for them is that they are going to have an abundant mindset.
Yes.
And also, because they are kids and they're still learning to process their emotions whenever they're acting in a way where they feel like, oh my God, why did she get more than me? Or why this? Like, I'm very careful of not using language that just kind of reaffirms the scarcity. Like, I'm big on two questions that I've always even coached my clients on. Whenever somebody says something that doesn't align with who you are or that triggers you, always say like, really, tell me more. Or what do you mean? Can you explain? And so with my daughter, whenever she's like, why does she get more than me? I would say like, what do you mean? Can you explain? And she's like, well, she got a bigger piece than me. I'm like, well, why do you think that's unfair? So we're big on abundance.
Yeah.
But also, they have such a good habit now, Antonio, that like Christmas time, they got money from their grandparents, and my daughter is like, oh, let's put it in the buckets. And I said, actually, this is like a special money, so this one is okay to spend. And so every so often, I do teach them that not everything is for tomorrow, but they do have good habits, and I can only hope that they're going to apply the things that I'm teaching them. But at the end of the day, it's like, they're going to do whatever they're going to do. And I just have to be okay knowing that they're going to be good people, good humans. And that's why, we're also giving them the gift of putting them in a bilingual, bicultural school, because we want them to understand that all humans can be loved and all humans are welcome.
Yeah. Love it. I ask everybody this, what is your recipe for world peace?
Ooh. My recipe for world peace. Well, I'm not sure what other people have said, but I think that there's times when we also have to be okay with other people's opinion. Like, especially when it comes to like politics, sometimes we think that one side has to be right. And the truth is that we don't always have to be right. We just have to get along, right? And so, yeah, that's my answer. Like, be open to all kinds of opinions, because I can believe on something, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's the only way or the right way. And so I tend to actually surround myself with people that have different point of views, because I've always learned something, right? And we do need more of that right now. Like, we need
definitely
more world peace for sure, because there's so many things going on right now that, affect our mental health, our economic, all of these things. But I also want to say that at the end of the day, we have to control what we can control.
Yes.
It seems like a cold comment, but, me as an individual, I have no control of war whatsoever.
Yeah.
I would like to think that I do, but I don't. But the only thing that I can control is how, my emotions, myself, the people that I love, meaning that don't let their reactions affect you. And this is why it's so important that we understand that as a collective, yes, we have power, but as an own individual, we don't.
Yeah.
Control what you can control.
Yeah. And that's perfect. I mean, I think that by taking that approach, if everybody did take that approach, then it would happen, right?
We will have world peace.
yeah, exactly. I always say if I get up in the morning, I say, with a good attitude, saying there's going to be world peace today, and everybody else does, and we walk out the door like that, then it would be different. But I'd like
I love that, or that you have to be at peace, right? Like I'm at peace with who I am, and if you said it perfectly, if everyone felt that way and approached their daily day like that, that would be amazing.
And that's what I love about what you do, is that you help people heal. And I was going to ask, you're creating this, it's an evolution of a way to look at money and to have a relationship with money, which is that's really, really cool.
That's the longest relationship we're ever going to have. The longest relationship is going to be with money. And money is at the center of at everything we do, right?
Yes.
Everything, or the way we feed ourselves, the way we have a home, the way we work, the way we think, right? And so I always say, embody that identity of spend money making money. It's a good thing for you and your family.
Yeah. Where can people find you?
Well, people can find me on Instagram, mostly, or my website, and that is at sayholawealth.com. And come join me, come see me, join the newsletter, listen to the podcast. I have a podcast, and I teach you guys what I'm doing. I became an angel investor, and I'm going to teach people that. And I do teach people that.
Yeah. Well, your journey reminds me of somebody put here almost as an angel, in the way that you took a different path than what you could have just fell into, with your culture background and everything that you've experienced. So, you definitely are an angel in this space and here on this planet. And thank you so much for your time. I know time is money, they say, but I really appreciate it. I could talk to you about many more things about this, about your family raising biracial children, and maybe that's another conversation. But I just want to say thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much for having me. Have a great afternoon.
You too. Thank you for joining us for the Multiracialverse podcast. My name is Antonio Fernandez. You can find this podcast on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Huge shout out to my friend Johannes Skoda for mixing and creating the intro music, and DJ Kazam for the track.